On August 12, 2000, the Russian submarine Kursk K-141, a giant of the seas, disappeared into the cold waters of the Barents Sea. What began as a routine military training mission quickly became one of the worst submarine accidents in history. Two powerful explosions ripped through the submarine, killing most of the 118 crew members instantly, and trapping the remaining survivors in a cold, dark space 108 meters below the ocean's surface. The world watched with growing concern as Russia attempted to rescue its sailors. As hours passed, the hope of saving the crew began to fade. What unfolded was not just a story of terrible loss, but an incredible demonstration of human determination and skill. The largest and most expensive submarine rescue and recovery operation ever attempted. The Kursk was no ordinary submarine. At 154 meters long and weighing 18,000 tons, it was a titan of the Russian Navy, armed with enough firepower to take on an entire fleet. But on that fateful day, a catastrophic blast ripped a hole in the hull and sent the Kursk to the ocean floor. For the 23 men who survived the initial explosions, the situation was desperate. Trapped in the aft compartment, they waited for a rescue, but it never came. Russia's response was slow and chaotic. Despite offers of international help, the Russian Navy insisted on handling the crisis alone. Days passed and hope turned into heartbreak. By the time divers reached the submarine, all 118 members were dead, as this footage shows the moment the first divers reached the sub. Despite the tragedy, the Kursk story took an unexpected turn when Russia decided to undertake one of the most daring salvage operations in history. The mission was daunting, filled with risks and unexploded torpedoes, radiation leaks, and the sheer weight of the submarine. Yet, against all odds, an international team led by Dutch companies Mammoet and Smit International took on the challenge in October of 2001. This is the story of the Kursk. Join us as we dive into the depths of the Barents Sea to uncover the dramatic events that unfolded, leading to the sinking and the incredible $70 million effort to salvage the sub. The Kursk wasn't just a submarine. It was a huge symbol of Russia's naval power and pride. It was of the Oscar II class, one of the biggest and most advanced subs in the Russian fleet. At 155 meters long, it was built tough with a double hull design to survive torpedo hits. The outer hull was made of steel covered in thick rubber to make it hard to detect, while the inner hull was made of super strong steel, with a gap between them for extra protection. This made people think the sub was nearly unsinkable. The Kursk was also packed with weapons, like 24 cruise missiles and torpedoes, which could take out an entire aircraft carrier group. Basically, it was a beast of a sub, showing off Russia's military strength and playing a key role in defending its waters. In August of 2000, the Kursk was deployed to the Barents Sea as part of the Russian Summer X naval exercise, which was being closely monitored by Western nations. The event was meant to showcase the revitalization of Russia's naval forces after years of decline. The submarine, along with other naval assets, was tasked with simulating real combat scenarios. As part of this drill, the Kursk was preparing to fire a dummy torpedo at the Kirov-class battlecruiser Pyotr Veliki. At 8:51 local time, Kursk requested permission to conduct the torpedo training and received the go-ahead. The crew began preparations to load and fire a practice Type 65 torpedo, a massive weapon over 10 meters in length and weighing 5 tons. However, at 11:29 a.m., disaster struck. Seismic sensors across northern Europe detected a small explosion, followed by a second, much larger explosion 2 minutes later. The Kursk, once a symbol of invincibility, was now plummeting to the ocean floor in the Barents Sea. If you find these historical journeys fascinating, please give us a like and share this video with others who might enjoy diving into the past. Your support helps us to keep sharing more incredible stories like these. The Kursk submarine had 118 crew members, many of whom were highly skilled and experienced, making them some of the best in the Russian Navy. They had trained for years to operate and care for one of the most advanced submarines in the fleet. The crew included officers with a lot of experience, engineers who knew the ship inside and out, and younger sailors eager to prove themselves. One of the leaders was Captain Gennady Lyachin, known for his strong leadership and deep knowledge. Many of the crew came from naval families, continuing a long tradition of service. Their teamwork and commitment showed in all that they did. This ranged from intense training drills to shared laughter in the submarine's tight spaces. Tragically, the Russian Navy's response to the disaster was slow and disorganized. Nearby ships heard the explosion, but it took more than 6 hours for officials to figure out something bad had happened. The rescue of the Kursk was delayed mostly because its emergency buoy, a device that's supposed to float to the surface and send a help signal, was turned off during an earlier mission. Without it, no one knew the sub was in trouble right away. When they finally found the sub, rescue attempts were slowed down by red tape and old equipment. Adding to the problems, the Russian Navy's rescue capabilities were severely limited due to outdated and neglected equipment. The Russian Navy used to have 2 India-class submarines. Each submarine had 2 Poseidon-class DSRVs, which stands for Deep Sea Rescue Vehicles. These rescue vehicles were pretty high-tech and could dive really deep, up to 693 meters or 2,270 feet. But because of money problems, the submarines and their rescue equipment had been sitting in a shipyard in St. Petersburg since 1994. They were waiting for repairs, but those repairs never happened. Even though countries like the US and the UK offered to help, Russia's defense minister, Igor Sergeyev, told the American embassy that Russia didn't need help. He said the rescue operation was already underway. Because of this, Russia said no to the offer. The disaster began with a leak of concentrated HTP, which is hydrogen peroxide, from a Type 6576A practice torpedo. This torpedo relied on HTP as an oxidizer. HTP is a volatile chemical that decomposes rapidly. When it comes into contact with certain metals, it turns into oxygen and steam. This reaction generates extreme heat and pressure, which in an enclosed space like a torpedo casing can be disastrous. In this case, a defective weld within the torpedo's casing allowed the HTP to leak, setting off a dangerous chemical breakdown. When the hydrogen peroxide broke down, it created a lot of heat and pressure inside the torpedo. This built up to a dangerous point, and the torpedo casing just couldn't handle it anymore. It exploded with a force of about 100 kilograms of TNT. The explosion tore through the front part of the submarine where the torpedoes were stored. Everyone in that section was killed right away. The blast also started fires, which burned up all the oxygen in the area, making the situation even more deadly. The explosion sent a powerful shock wave through the submarine's hull. Nearby ships felt the shockwave, but at the time they didn't realize it was an emergency or even understood what had just happened. While the first explosion caused severe damage, it was only the beginning of an even greater disaster. A mere 135 seconds after the initial blast, a far more powerful explosion occurred. The fire and extreme pressure generated by the first detonation had ignited additional torpedoes within the forward compartment, triggering a catastrophic chain reaction. The second explosion was massive, equivalent to 2 to 3 tons of TNT, and registered as a 4.2 magnitude event on the Richter scale. This detonation was so forceful that it tore through both the inner and outer hulls of the submarine. The shockwave spread through the water, creating tremors across the Barents Sea. It was detected by seismic monitoring stations all the way in Alaska. The destruction was absolute. Anyone in the front compartments of the submarine was immediately vaporized by the blast. The Kursk turned into a twisted, broken hulk, sinking fast towards the ocean floor. When the Kursk sank, it came to rest about 108 meters below the surface. The explosions had badly damaged the submarine, flooding most of its compartments right away, which killed many crew members. However, 23 men in the back section of the submarine survived the initial blasts. Led by Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov, they took shelter in the 9th compartment and sealed themselves in, hoping for a rescue. Kolesnikov wrote a note that was later found by rescuers, showing they survived for a while after the explosions. Inside the sealed compartment, they were in a bad situation. The emergency lights were dim, the submarine's power was gone, and oxygen was running low. As the carbon dioxide in the air increased, breathing became harder. The men knew their survival depended on rescue teams getting to them. While the crew fought to survive in the dark, oxygen-deprived compartment, the Russian government's response to the crisis was marked by delays, confusion, and critical errors. Russian officials took more than 6 hours to accept that something was wrong. When it became clear that the Kursk submarine was in serious trouble, the Russian Navy didn't take it seriously at first. Instead, they claimed the submarine had just had a small technical issue, not a huge explosion. This delay and a lack of honesty wasted a lot of time that could have been used to save lives with a better rescue effort. Basically, their poor response made the situation worse. As the crew struggled to survive in the dark, running out of air, the Russian government's slow and disorganized response made the situation even more desperate. It was the day after the disaster that the Russian government officially acknowledged that the Kursk submarine had suffered a serious accident. Even then, they shared very few details about what had happened. The Russian Navy tried to rescue the submarine crew, but their efforts were blocked by technical problems and poor planning. As more time passed, the chances of saving any survivors became smaller and smaller. International help was offered almost immediately. Countries like the UK, the United States, and Norway quickly volunteered their advanced underwater rescue equipment, which could have potentially saved the crew. However, the Russian government, acting rigidly and traditionally, initially refused all foreign assistance. They insisted that their own teams could handle the emergency. This decision turned out to be a terrible mistake. The Russian rescue submarines failed multiple times to connect properly with the Kursk's emergency exit hatch, which further delayed any attempted rescue. What began as hours of uncertainty quickly turned into days. By the time the Russian officials finally agreed to accept help from other countries, it was far too late. When Norwegian divers eventually reached the Kursk, they discovered a heartbreaking truth. All 118 crew members on the submarine had died. This disaster was not just a tragic loss of life, it was also a powerful lesson about the dangers of secrecy, bureaucratic delays, and being unprepared during a crisis. As the world grappled with the tragedy of the Kursk submarine, the reasons behind the decision to recover it revealed a mix of compassion, responsibility, and political pressure, each with its own problems. A big reason was to get back the bodies of the 118 crew members who died in the accident. For the families of the sailors, the loss was terrible, and not being able to bury their loved ones made it worse. On Tuesday, the 22nd of August, 10 days after the submarine sank, Russian President Vladimir Putin met with a large group of upset and grieving people at the Vidyayevo naval base. Around 400 to 600 residents from the Navy base, along with about 350 family members of the Kursk crew, were there. Many of them were angry and heartbroken over the tragedy. This meeting was an important moment, as it gave the families and community members a chance to express their feelings directly to Putin. It was at this moment that Putin declared that the Kursk would be salvaged and brought back to the surface. The Russian president, showing a rare, softer side, felt he had a duty to help these families find closure. The second reason for raising the Kursk was to investigate the cause of the disaster. The submarine, once considered unsinkable, had been torn apart by two massive explosions, and the Kremlin needed answers. Was it a collision with another vessel, as some officials initially claimed, or was it an internal malfunction? The truth was buried 108 meters below the surface, and salvaging the wreck was the only way to uncover it. Investigators planned to inspect the submarine's wreckage. They were particularly interested in the section that stored the torpedoes. They wanted to determine if the explosions were caused by a malfunction inside or something from the outside. This wasn't just about pointing fingers. It was about making sure similar accidents don't happen again and keeping other Russian submarine crews safe. According to the Vice Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, Ilya Klebanov, the decision to lift the Kursk was also heavily influenced by the need to reduce environmental risks. The sub had 2 nuclear reactors, and leaving them on the ocean floor could have led to dangerous radiation leaks. The Barents Sea, where the Kursk sank, is a key fishing area and part of the fragile Arctic ecosystem. If radiation spreads, it could have poisoned sea life and harmed the jobs of many people who depend on fishing. To avoid this potential disaster, the Russian government decided the only safe option was to raise the Kursk and secure the reactors. Finally, the salvage operation was about restoring national pride. By undertaking the complex and unprecedented task of raising the submarine, Putin aimed to save face and demonstrate Russia's technological capabilities and resilience. The operation was a chance to show the world that Russia could handle such a monumental challenge, even in the face of immense difficulties. It was also an opportunity to honor the crew's memory and reaffirm the nation's commitment to its military and its people. However, the decision to salvage the Kursk was not without its challenges. The Barents Sea is one of the toughest places on Earth. It's freezing cold, has powerful currents, and the weather can change in an instant. Working underwater there, especially at 108 meters deep, is super hard. Divers need special gear and a lot of training to handle it. The water is dark and icy, making even simple tasks a challenge. There's always a risk that equipment could break or someone could make a mistake, which could be dangerous. To stay safe, the divers worked in shifts and spent hours in special chambers to avoid getting sick from the pressure changes. Even with all these precautions, the job is still exhausting and risky. One of the biggest risks during the submarine rescue was accidentally starting a nuclear reaction. The Kursk had torpedoes on board, and some might have still been armed. If something went wrong during the rescue operation, it could cause another explosion. The submarine's nuclear reactors were turned off, but they were still very fragile. If the rescue team damaged the reactors while lifting the submarine, radiation could leak into the ocean. This meant the team had to be extremely careful. They used advanced tools to carefully cut into the submarine and attached cables. Their goal was to lift the submarine without making the damaged ship unstable or causing any more problems. Political and logistical challenges made the salvage operation very difficult. From April to June of 2001, the remains of the Kursk would be surveyed by divers and remotely operated submersibles. At that time, Russia would eventually ask for help from international experts, leading to the setting up of the KK Foundation. The KK Foundation was a team of companies, mostly from the Netherlands, like Mammoet and Smit International. These companies came together to take on the huge challenge of recovering the Russian submarine Kursk. The Dutch government even gave them money to help pay for the operation. The main job of the KK Foundation was to handle the costs and organize the tricky process of lifting the submarine from the ocean floor. They made sure the project didn't go over budget and that everything ran smoothly. Raising a submarine as big and complicated as the Kursk was very expensive, and the Foundation worked hard to control costs while keeping everyone safe. The Kursk Salvage Mission, which cost $70 million, is still one of the hardest and most expensive underwater recovery jobs ever done. To cut down on costs, 3 companies brought advanced in-house technology and special skills to the mission. They had to create custom equipment and software programs designed specifically for this challenging task. One key piece of equipment was a massive barge called Giant 4, which was specifically modified to carry the submarine underneath it. This custom design would be crucial to successfully recovering the submarine. The first stage of saving the submarine involved carefully checking the wreck's condition. The Kursk suffered serious structural damage, mainly in the front section. An explosion in the torpedo room completely wrecked the front of the boat. Russian officials were worried about potential dangers like unexploded torpedoes. Because of these risks, they decided it would be too dangerous to raise the entire submarine in one piece. Instead, they planned to cut off the badly damaged front section and recover the rest of the vessel. A team of highly skilled divers, along with remote-controlled underwater vehicles, was sent to study the wreck in detail. Their main tasks were to see if the hull was still intact, decide if it was safe to cut into smaller pieces, and pick the best spots to hook up the lifting gear. Since the sub was in rough shape and the job was dangerous, they had to plan carefully and take their time to avoid any mistakes. August 2001 marked the beginning of the operational phase of the project as custom-made equipment arrived in the Barents Sea. The Kursk's front part, the bow, was badly damaged from an explosion and still had torpedo pieces inside, making it super dangerous. Before they could lift the rest of the sub, they had to cut off the bow. Engineers came up with a smart plan. They used a cable covered in tungsten carbide, one of the strongest materials out there, to slice through the thick steel. They set up 2 big anchors on either side of the wreck to guide the cable back and forth, making sure the cut was clean and controlled. This whole process took 10 grueling days, with divers and engineers working non-stop in freezing Arctic waters. They dealt with strong currents, icy temperatures, and barely being able to see, but they didn't give up. In the end, they successfully cut off the bow, making it safe to lift the rest of the sub. Once the damaged bow had been removed, the next phase involved securing the submarine's hull for retrieval. The operation required the installation of 26 specifically designed lifting points along the length of the vessel. These points had to be positioned with extreme precision to evenly distribute the enormous weight of this submarine. A team of skilled divers spent weeks cutting precise holes in the outer and inner layers of the sunken ship. These holes were needed to attach powerful hydraulic grippers, built to handle the high-pressure conditions deep underwater. The grippers were crucial to securely hold the wreck during the lift. The Barents Sea is a tough place to work because it has powerful currents, temperatures that suddenly change, and really rough weather. These conditions push the crew and their equipment to the limit. But even with all these challenges, the team managed to set up the lifting gear they needed. This was a big win because the project took months of planning and a lot of effort to pull off. With the Kursk finally prepped, the most critical phase, the actual lifting of the submarine, was set into motion. The operation relied on the Giant 4, which served as the primary lifting platform. This colossal vessel underwent huge modifications to accommodate the Kursk, including the addition of custom-built harnesses designed to carry the submarine's hull securely. The lifting system used to raise the Kursk submarine was made up of 26 heavy-duty hydraulic strand jacks. These jacks were like giant, powerful muscles that could lift heavy things. Each jack was attached to thick steel cables, which were carefully threaded through holes that were precisely cut into both the outer and inner layers of the submarine's hull. To make sure the submarine didn't get more damage while being lifted, engineers created a special gripping system. This system was designed to hold the Kursk's hull tightly but gently, so it wouldn't break apart during the lift. The submarine was extremely heavy, and the ocean where it was located, the Barents Sea, was rough and unpredictable. This made the process of lifting it very tricky. The team had to make sure the submarine was perfectly balanced as it was being lifted. If the weight shifted suddenly, or if the submarine wasn't aligned just right, it could have been a disaster. The whole thing could have fallen apart and crashed back down to the ocean floor, ruining the entire operation. So balance and precision were absolutely critical. On the 8th of October, 2001, after months of critical planning, the lift began. The operation had to be synchronized to compensate for underwater currents and surface wave movement. Using customized software systems, the hydraulic jacks slowly increased tension on the steel cables, slowly elevating the submarine over a painstaking 15-hour period. The moment the Kursk finally broke free from the seabed was met with a mix of relief and anxiety. Engineers, divers, and salvage specialists monitored the lift every step of the way, knowing that a single miscalculation could spell disaster. Fortunately, the operation proceeded without incident, and the Kursk was securely positioned beneath the Giant 4 for transport. With the Kursk successfully lifted, the next step involved transporting the wreck to the Russian Navy's Roslyakovo shipyard near Murmansk. Here, forensic examination and recovery of the crew's remains would take place. The Giant 4 carried the submarine to the floating dry dock. Extra precautions were taken to ensure a stable docking process. 2 massive pontoons were placed beneath the barge, raising it by 20 meters. Once aligned inside the dry dock, the pontoons were further inflated. This allowed engineers to detach the Kursk from the lifting apparatus. The submarine was then carefully lowered onto the dry dock floor. Forensic experts and naval investigators began their solemn work. The successful recovery of the Kursk set a world record for the heaviest object ever salvaged from such depths. The operation demonstrated extraordinary advancements in underwater engineering and international collaboration. The recovery of the Kursk submarine was an incredibly difficult and dangerous mission, but it turned out to be a huge success. It showed how creative, determined, and resourceful humans can be, even when faced with almost impossible challenges. The loss of the Kursk and its crew was a terrible tragedy, and one of the worst moments in naval history. The big push to recover the submarine showed that people can join forces and do incredible things, even when the odds are stacked against them. The mission showed our deep desire to find answers, remember those we've lost, and test the limits of what we can do, even in the ocean's darkest and harshest places. The official investigation found that the first explosion on the submarine happened because a torpedo leaked highly concentrated hydrogen peroxide fuel. This chemical reacted badly with brass and copper parts inside of the torpedo tube, causing a big explosion. While this first explosion was serious, it wasn't as huge as the second one. The second explosion was much worse because it involved several torpedoes blowing up at the same time in the front part of the submarine. This massive blast destroyed the front sections of the sub and killed most of the crew right away. The Russian Navy faced a lot of criticism after the disaster. People pointed out that their safety rules were old and not good enough, and they didn't handle the crisis well. They were slow to send help, turned down offers of assistance from other countries, and gave the wrong information to the public about what had happened. All of this made people even more upset. What made the situation even sadder was that this wasn't even a real mission. It was supposed to be a training exercise. Instead, it turned into one of the worst submarine accidents ever recorded. One of the most difficult decisions with the Kursk disaster was the decision to leave the front section, the bow of the submarine, underwater. This section of the wreckage included the torpedo room. Lifting the submarine was seen as too dangerous because of possible leftover explosions. Many experts thought the Russian government didn't want to raise the front section. They believed this might reveal serious issues with the vessel's construction and upkeep. The area was set up as a carefully watched zone, with environmental scientists checking the site for possible radiation leaks or other dangerous effects from the sunken submarine. The Russian government said the wreckage was not an immediate threat. Still, many citizens were anxious about the possible long-term contamination of the waters nearby. As the Kursk was towed into the dry dock, workers began the grim task of searching for the remains of the crew. It was here that personal artifacts were recovered: letters, watches, and other small belongings that somehow survived the devastation. Among the most heartbreaking discoveries were the notes written by Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov. In his last moments, stuck in the 9th compartment with 22 other crew members, he wrote about what was happening. They were in complete darkness. And as time went on, they started losing hope of being rescued. It was a desperate situation, and he recorded their fight to survive as their chances grew slimmer and slimmer with every passing hour. The haunting words scrawled on the paper, "We won't last more than a day. No need to despair. Regards to everybody," served as a stark reminder of the human cost of the disaster. The disaster was more than just a technical challenge. It was a test of trust between the Russian government and its citizens. In the early days after the incident, the government's unclear statement and reluctance to accept help from other countries only made people more suspicious. The families of the sailors wanted answers and demanded to know what had happened. Their sadness was made worse by how little information they were given. The deep emotions from this tragedy spread throughout Russia, leading to important discussions about military safety, old equipment, and how a government should take care of its soldiers. Despite the official government report, rumors and conspiracy theories about what really caused the Kursk explosion continued to spread. Some officials claimed the submarine had collided with an enemy submarine. Others thought a missile accidentally fired during the naval training exercise, which might have caused the disaster. While no solid proof supported any of these theories, they showed how much people distrusted the official story. The secrecy around the Kursk's mission and the unclear initial information made people suspicious. These doubts would take many years to resolve and heal. In the aftermath, Russian naval operations underwent significant changes. Funding was allocated to modernize the fleet, enhance training, and improve communication protocols. International cooperation in maritime safety increased, with agreements to allow faster response times in case of future submarine accidents. However, Kursk's loss remained a harsh reminder that progress often comes at an unbearable cost. For the families of the 118 sailors, every anniversary of the tragedy serves as a painful commemoration. Memorials stand in honor of the crew, and the names of the fallen are etched in plaques and monuments. Their sacrifice is remembered not only as a moment of national mourning, but as a call to never repeat the mistakes that led to such an avoidable disaster.